Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've uploaded hundreds of talks here that I've recorded at meetings in West LA, and I've also recorded conventions starting in 2013. I've got a bunch of those up. And Walt and Mary Murray, the original owners of Encore Audio Archives, started the company in the 80s, and Walt recorded Joe and Charlie's and a bunch of stuff down in Vista, California. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994. I hope you find something you like, so please like and subscribe to my channel and comment down below. If you want to hear something that I don't have or that you don't see, I'll see that I get it. Anyways, take care and have a great day if you want to.
Thank you, Al. I'm glad he wasn't at the meeting tonight that they asked him to pick me up, because he picked me up at the airport, and I'm very grateful for that, and he's going to take me back in the morning. And several of you have already told me if he didn't, they would. They want to get me out of town. And I want to thank the committee for asking me, and Rick, thank you. You know, he said he was grateful that he hadn't had a drink, and I've got a list. There's 47 people told me they were grateful that you hadn't had one too. My name's Bryant Bivens, and I'm a real alcoholic. I'm sober today by God's grace, and because the program of Alcoholics Anonymous works in my life a day at a time. And because it does work in my life a day at a time, I haven't had a drink since the day I came back to Alcoholics Anonymous. And that was December the 25th, 1960. Thank you. And for that sobriety, I'm eternally grateful. But if it didn't mean anything but just sobriety, I don't believe I'd have been around here that long. But AA has given me a life that the book describes as being happy, joyous, and free. And I can say that today, that my life is happy and joyous and free. I'm happy because I have discovered me. I know what I am. I don't have to pretend any longer. I'm me, and you accepted me, and I'll be grateful for that. And so I've had a lot of fun, and my life has been joyous, particularly watching other people who were hopeless alcoholics, and to know that I had a small part in seeing the miracle of Alcoholics Anonymous happen in their life has made my life joyous. And many of you are in this room today that have made my life joyous. You know, I've got some friends sitting here on the front row that came down a pretty good ways to hear me, and we've been buddying around a little bit this weekend, but I've got friends like that all over the world, and I don't believe I'd have had enough to bury me if I'd have died from alcoholism, to be absolutely frank with you. So today my life is joyous, and I'm free. Today I'm free. I'm free, and I'm glad. You know, the book talks about we're going to know a new freedom. A new freedom and a new happiness. And I'm glad they put that word new in there, because I didn't know what freedom was. You know, when I was discharged from the asylum, I used to say, I'm free. Yeah, I wasn't free, I was just loose. I was back there again in 60 days, so I wasn't free at all. But today I know what that new freedom is. I am free from my old values and my old beliefs and my old ideas. I'm free from that. I was a prisoner of these things, what I thought was good for me. I was a prisoner within myself I was a prisoner, and I was also the warden. I was also the warden, too, because I was the one that was responsible for getting all that crap out of me, and you were responsible for giving me a new life, you in the grace of God. Because my book tells me that deep down in every man, woman, and child is the basic fundamental of God. We've got it covered up with all this crap that we put in our heads and our hearts, and when we get rid of that, the goodness emerges. And so I'm particularly grateful that I've got a life today that's happy, joyous, and free. I'm a member of the Mayberry group of Alcoholics Anonymous. In North Carolina, I have a home group. I'm there. I go to meetings. I've got a sponsor, and I work with drunks. And I heard the lady yesterday, or this morning, talking about doing 12-step work. And this is something that the new breed of Alcoholics Anonymous is not involved in too much. I know people that's sober 10 years that have never been on a 12-step call, and how pitiful that is. How pitiful it is that they haven't helped another drunk to find a new and different way of life. If you haven't done it, try it. Somebody did it for you. You do it for somebody else. And I'm extremely grateful to be here at this Old Timers Roundup. I'm gradually becoming an old timer. But I'm especially grateful to the old timers who kept the doors open for me so that I'd have a place to come when I had no place to go. A couple of Mississippians that come into my mind is Bob Thompson and Franklin Williams. Southern gentlemen. And I wanted to be like that. I'd heard them say, and they'd stand behind a podium like this, and they said, this program has allowed me to walk with dignity and pride. And God, I wanted that. I wanted it worse than anything in the world. And I found it. I found it right here. Today I can stand before you with dignity and pride and know who I am and know what my purpose is in life. And for this, I'm eternally grateful. But we owe those old-timers a deep debt of gratitude because they kept the doors open so that you and I would have a place. And it's our duty and our obligation to keep those doors open. If Bill and Bob hadn't passed it on, we wouldn't have it. But people got the message, and they carried it on. And it's up to us now to carry it on. And I hope that each of you do that. I didn't want to be an alcoholic worse than anybody I've ever known in my life, and I had a reason. My daddy was an alcoholic, and I didn't like what alcohol did to my daddy. You know, I didn't like the man he became. I knew what he was. I knew that he was a good man, but when he drank, he was a different person, and I despised him, and I despised alcohol, and I said, I'll never be like that. I'll never drink like that. I'll never drink, period. You know, but I got to tell you what kind of kid I was. You know, I was a screwed up kid. I really was. Everybody in my family was screwed up. Flaky as a snowstorm. Our family revolved around a practicing alcoholic. He was right in the center, and he called the shots, and we jumped like the puppet on a string. And so we lived in a state of anxiety at my house at all times. My daddy, you know, revolved around him. We never knew when he was coming home, if he was coming home, who he was going to bring with him, or what kind of condition he'd be in when he got there. We'd fix an evening meal and wait for him to come home and eat. And if he didn't eat, we'd just sit there and didn't eat. Yeah, that's pretty weird. They call them dysfunctional families these days. And back then they said we were crazy as hell. I'm not sure they weren't right back then, because this doesn't really make any sense. And there was an awful lot of fear in my life at an early age. I don't know where the fear came from. I was born with it. And then I was taught additional fears. And when I got to this program, my book tells me about fears, real or imagined. And I could write a book on those. But I had an awful lot of fear. And a lot of it was ingrained in me. My grandmother, I can remember when I was a kid, she'd call us all together and said, I've got to talk to everybody. And we'd all get there and listen, and she said, I've got a feeling something bad's going to happen. That was it. 5 years later, something bad would happen. She said, I told you so. So I had enough fears without having any taught to me. A lot of frustrations early in my life. My daddy was a tobacco man. He was a very capable man. He was capable of making an awful lot of money. But I told you that he was an alcoholic. So he was more capable of spending it than he was making it. And I think this is where some of my frustrations came in. I knew how much all the kids' daddies in the neighborhood, kids know a lot. I knew how much money their daddies made, and my daddy made more than theirs. And they had new bikes. I had a rusty one. They had things, and I didn't have things. And it was very frustrating to me. And I thought about it, and I dwelled on it. And I developed a resentment. And that resentment led into pure unadulterated hate. And so I was afflicted with that. And I was a kid that wasn't satisfied with anything that I had. I wasn't satisfied with my friends. I wasn't satisfied with my family. I wasn't satisfied with my status in life. I wasn't satisfied with anything. So I guess it's a blessing I didn't have a lot. I really would have been dissatisfied if I had a lot of things, I had another thing wrong with me, too. And I know you're going to find this hard to believe. I was a liar. I didn't start lying after I started drinking. I started lying right after I started talking. And I became real good at it. Had to lie for any occasion. One to make me look better or you look worse. It was always to my advantage, the lies that I told. So this was early, and when I started drinking, I became a professional liar. So I had this, I wasn't satisfied. I didn't seem to fit anywhere. I just didn't seem to fit, and I was just wandering around loose there for about 15 and a half years. And I was at a party one night. I went to a party, said I wasn't going to have a good time, and usually when you say that, you don't. And I got to that party, and there was 8 or 9 tables sitting over there, The kids were all having a good time, and I looked around, and there was bottles sitting on those tables. I said, I got to check that out, because I ain't drinking no liquor, And I looked at every one of those bottles, and they all said wine, W-I-N-E. And I looked around, and everybody was having a good time except me. And I said, maybe this is what kids do to have fun. This is not what ruined my daddy. Hard liquor ruined my daddy, so maybe I'll have a glass of that wine. And I drank a glass of wine. And before it went around to everybody else, I drank another glass of wine. And when that second glass of wine went down, things started happening in my life. I'm going to tell you that. that warm feeling just went all over me. Fingers, toes, that sort of like swallowing an umbrella and having it open up on the inside of you. And God, I felt good. Anxiety, oh no, I knew everything, I knew what fear, absolutely no fear. I was out there with the girls, I was dancing, I was talking, I was doing things. And here I was, feeling better than I'd ever felt in my life. I said, this is great. This is great. There was one thing wrong, though. There wasn't but one thing wrong. I wanted to feel just a little bit better. I reckon that's why y'all here too, ain't it? Just wasn't satisfied with feeling good. Had to feel a little bit better. So I put my mathematical mind into action. Borders on genius, by the way. I said, if 2 drinks will make you feel this good, 4 will make you feel twice as good. And so I set out to try 4. But somewhere between 2 and 4, I got in trouble. I know it's hard to do, but I'd done it. Because on that 4th glass, I had a blackout. I was running around doing all these little cute things that they tell you about the next day, and we make a big deal out of it. Oh, nothing to it. 10 years later, they told me what happened to blackout. I said, "The hell you say?" I passed out that night. All the classic symptoms of alcoholism were present the very first time that I drank. The very first time that I drank. I said I'd never drink, and I was drinking. Number one, I had no control over the amount of alcohol that I took into my system once I started. Number 2, I liked the effect produced by alcohol. Oh, yeah, I did. It was great. The blackouts, the pass-outs. I did everything except get a DWI, and I won't drive, and there's a reason I didn't get that, probably. But I woke up the next morning, or came to, or whatever you do, I came to the next morning. I thought I was going to die. Worst I'd ever felt in my life. I said, oh, God, I'm going to die. And I lay there for a few minutes, and I didn't die. And my mind went back. My mind went back to the night before. And I remembered how good those 2 glasses of wine made me feel. And I said, I believe I know what was wrong. I just believe I sort of overdrank there. And if we just minimize it and sort of hold it down, you can maintain that good feeling. From then you can have it and you can enjoy it. And I started feeling bad again. I said, but you're going to die and you ain't never going to get to do it again. I didn't know what to do. Back then, by God, you didn't call Mama when you was 15 and a half years old until I got drunk last night. Would you help me out? I would be dead if I'd done that. And you don't call your friends and said, I drank something last night that almost killed me, and I just can't wait to drink some more. That don't make any sense. So you just sort of figure things out for yourself. That's another reason y'all are here, too. We're awful good at figuring things out for ourselves, even if they're wrong. But I thought that I didn't consider that a problem. I thought that I had found a solution to my problem. Because I never had felt that good before. Nothing ever. I'd been baptized in church. Hell, I didn't feel good. It just got wet. That's all you done. And this made me feel good. The only time I'd ever felt good in my life, why not? God, why not do it? And so I did it. And I knew early in my drinking career I wasn't drinking like my friends. You know, we'd get together and have 6, 7 beers, and they said, I've got to go home. I'm beginning to feel this. God, that's wimpy. Go home. Go home when you start feeling good? That don't even make sense. I'd go to town when I started feeling good, you know, and started getting in a little minor trouble. Usually when you go to town about drunk, you will get into some minor or major trouble. Didn't intend for it to happen that way. You know, I didn't intend to get, I was just going to have some fun, but that's the trouble with trouble. It always starts out as fun, and ends up as trouble. And I got into trouble, and my friends weren't getting in trouble, and I analyzed them. I was good at analyzing and comparing me with others. And so I analyzed them. I said, by God, I know why. They are married. They've got children. They've got responsibilities. You are nothing but a playboy. You don't have any responsibilities at all. And if you had some responsibilities, you'd devote more time to your responsibilities and less time to your drinking. And now, you know, that made good sense to me. You know, y'all laughing like hell at it. But at that time, it made good sense to me. But I didn't handle responsibilities quite as well as I did booze. Tell you the truth. But back then, if you were going to have a family, I was hell-bent on having one. If you was going to have a family, it's real popular if you got married. Real popular. So I met this girl, and we were going to get married, and I went to our family doctor, going to get blood tests. Don't ever get one of them. This is where it all started. Don't ever get one. I told him what we wanted, get a blood test. He said, I'll be with you in 10 minutes, and in 10 minutes he was there. And he started talking about alcoholism. God, on and on and on. He'd been to Rutgers or Yale or somewhere all summer, and he knew everything there was to be known about alcoholism. And he told me more than I wanted to know, I'll tell you that. And I was wondering if he'd flipped out or something, you know. I said, what has this got to do with a blood test? And then he started telling me about a place out on the outskirts of town that he had a place that he treated alcoholics. I said, my God, what's that got to do with a blood test? Then he started telling me how much he liked my family and respected them. Well, hell, they hadn't done nothing for me in a pretty good while. I didn't want to hear that either. So finally, you know, you just have to tell them sometime. I said, if you'll just give me that piece of paper I came in here for, I'll be on my way, and if I ever need you, I'll call you. Real smart-like. So I got married, and I did real good for 3 or 4 months. Didn't drink anything but beer. An awful lot of it. That's the hardest work I've ever done in my life. Now, I'm going to tell you, you get up in the morning early and start popping them cans and drinking as hard as you can to get a buzz on by lunch. And by the time you start feeling pretty good, you're so tired from opening them cans and going to the bathroom, you can't enjoy it. Just wore me out. I listened to a man at our state convention talk, and he stayed drunk 15 years on beer. I never felt as sorry for anybody in my life. It just sort of made me tired listening, you know. It's a good guy, you know, but I said, he ain't never been in the fast lane in his life. I'll guarantee you that. I figured I had to get something to get on down there and get the job done. You know, I'm impatient. You know, I need to be drunk fairly early in the morning. I don't know why. I'll have more daylight hours to worry the hell out of everybody, I guess. Sir, it wasn't long before I was back on the hard stuff again. Drinking to live, living to drink, drinking around the clock, lying, doing all the things that alcoholics do. And people will not mind their own business. They will not. They are going to talk. They're going to say things that they don't know nothing about, and I didn't know nothing about either, but they said them anyhow. You know, and the word got around about my drinking. They won't mind their own business. You know, I'm laying out in my front yard. You know, about 6 o'clock in the morning. 4 people standing there looking at me. What the hell do they want? It's my yard. People to tell you about things that you do. I said, well, I know that. Got back to my job. And they called me in and told me that I needed to quit. Well, hell, it hadn't never occurred to me to quit from them 2 glasses of wine that I had till the day I came back to Alcoholics Anonymous. Never occurred to me to quit. I didn't have no experience of quitting. I knew I had to quit something, so I quit my job. I went home and told my wife about it. She started running that mouth, you know, and I got mad. Irritated me, and I packed my stuff, by God. I went to where all grown men go. Mamas. And I told my mama about it, and she said, well, son, why don't you quit? And I got mad with her. And I left there, and I went to get me a drink. And the guy that I've been buying it from said, Bryant, with a clear conscience, I can't sell you anymore. Said, this is killing you. Said, you need to quit. And I said, by God, it's Monday. That was a good day to quit. Looked like I wasn't going to get a drink. It's a good reason to quit. But I didn't have no experience of quitting. Not one bit. And I guess I must have been in pretty bad shape. I went in the public restroom that day, and a guy that I'd never laid eyes on said, man, you need to get off that booze. You're in bad shape. I said, well, I've quit. Started getting dark that day, and I decided I'd better go on home. You know, I wasn't all that mad. You know, I'd cool off a little bit. I wasn't shaking anymore. I was vibrating. Way past the shaking stage. Way past it. My wife got home. I said, call that doctor that knows everything. She said, I ain't calling him. I said, just dial the phone. I can't get my finger in that hole. So I called him and I apologized. You know, God, I hated that. I apologized and told him if he'd come over right away, I needed some help bad. He took his own time getting there. And he came over and he gave me a couple of shots right there. And the next morning he came by and picked me up and carried me out to his funny farm out on the outskirts of town. My first experience at trying out. And there was about 12 old men down there. I mean, they're as old as kerosene. So, they'd been everywhere in the world for detox. 10 times apiece. But they fascinated me. They fascinated me. They knew everything. They had an answer for any question. Might not have been right, but they had an answer. And they fascinated me, and I listened very close to what they said and stayed drunk 6 more years. They told me that I was not an alcoholic. I said, I know that. They told me that I was too young to be an alcoholic. I said, well, I know that too. They told me that I was too smart to be an alcoholic. You don't have any brain damage. You've just had some bad luck. I said, now, we will tell you this. People do not like for you to drink on the job. They frown on it. I said, you were wrong there. I said, but you have been a victim of circumstances. And they told me what to do. They said, now, you can get these capsules that sort of perk you up. And you can't smell them. And you can take those capsules during the day and they'll perk you up. And at night, if you want to take a drink or two, that's your business. If I got that sounds good to somebody that don't want to quit. And I didn't want to quit, I'll tell you that. So I went to the truck stop and got a quart jar of pills. You don't go to the drugstore, they just got them in them little bitty bottles. So I got mine at the truck stop, and I started taking pills by day and drinking a little bit at night. And I'm here to tell you, it worked out good. For 2 or 3 days. Then I got my days and nights mixed up. And I got my job and my home mixed up. I got my wife and some other woman mixed up. Everything was mixed up. Hell, I don't remember nothing about it. It was just mixed up. All I know is it lasted a pretty good while. This time I ended up in the nut house. The asylum. State hospital. Can you imagine Mama's boy in the state hospital? Bad news. Non-alcoholic. Still in the hospital. They had me in a straitjacket, you know, and I ain't never seen nobody that normal in a straitjacket in my life. There's always something wrong. And they kept me in it 5 days. And that was the most humiliating thing that had occurred to me. You know, they'd walk by and look at you and not say a word. God, not even a word. I said, boy, this is something else. I know now why they don't say anything to you. Because nothing you say makes any sense. You don't want to dialogue with somebody in a damn straitjacket, I'll guarantee you that. Well, I finally got out of there and finally got home. And my wife confronted me, and she said, while you were over there, you know, they never do tell the name of these places that you go. I know now why they don't do it. By God, they was ashamed of it. If you'd been out Betty Ford said, while you were out there, you know. She said, while you were over there, I heard about Alcoholics Anonymous. I said, well, I did too. And I thought it would, you know, sort of. And I had heard about it. They had meetings there on Wednesday night for them old guys, you know, like Larry and, you know, different ones, and they were alcoholic. Non-alcoholics had a poker game on Wednesday night, and I figured they needed me in the poker game worse than they did in AA. But still, I had heard about AA. And she said, well, I want you to go or go. I understood that. Yeah, Mommy had all my mind working, and I said, well, I was planning on going. She said, good, they'll be here in 10 minutes. I got it was a time set up. I know what it was. 10 minutes, they were there. 10 minutes. They were there right on the money. And they sent a bad drunk. I mean, he was bad. He was worse than I was. I knew that I couldn't quit.
And this guy was worse than I was, and they sent him to see me. Now, here's the kind of drunk he was. He was a real wino. His face stayed blood red all the time. And he had all these broken blood vessels in his face. And it looked like a road map. His eyes were yellow. All over, yellow. And had red streaks running through them. When I was drinking wine with him. So, he walks in my house. He walks in my house to help me. Well, he ain't red no more. He's just sort of pink. He ain't got no streaks running through it. They all gone, just pink, and he's got eyes. They're blue. No streaks running through them either. I looked at him, he looked good. I said, by God, Ham's learned how to drink, not be sick. I'll go anywhere with him, and I pushed him on out the door. I said, let's go. So I went to my first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. You know, I was 25 years old, couldn't tell me a thing. I was smart, too smart, too smart. I go to Alcoholics Anonymous, and I told them who I was and that I wanted to learn how to drink and not be sick. They said, shut up, boy. They've told me of that a lot since then. I don't think we say it enough in Alcoholics Anonymous. We let somebody that's been sober 45 minutes dominate a damn meeting with 35 or 40 people there. Let them talk. They need to, hell, they don't need to talk. They need to listen. God, that's what they told me I had to do. I didn't think that was very nice, but I sit there. I remember what my wife said. I sit there, and they was all hell-bent on staying sober, not drinking. You know, God, I couldn't stand it. One guy picked up a 90-day token, and I said, I know that's a lie. Can't nobody stay sober 90 days. Another guy said he hoped he stayed sober the rest of his life, a day at the time. I said, the rest of your life? God, I'm 25 years old. If I lived to be 85 years old, that's 60 years with not a drop. I almost threw up on that one now, I'll tell you that. But I got tied up with some guys that was serious about their sobriety. They went to meetings every night. Hell, I believe they quit their jobs so they'd go to the meetings. I said, we all going tonight? Going to a meeting? I said, yeah. You get through eating at night, there's no need to look out the window to see if they're there, because they're there. Just go on out the door. And I went and I listened to that not drinking stuff, but something sunk in. Not a lot of knowledge sunk in to my head, but I couldn't forget those people. I couldn't forget those guys because I knew they cared about me. I knew it. I knew they loved me, and I knew they cared whether I was drunk or sober. And I stood them as long as I could. I said, I got to get away. And so I left to do things my way. You know, and I did things my way for 6 years. And everything went to hell. That's right, they sure did. Lost everything that I had. Lost everything that I had. I lost the home, I lost the business, I lost the family. Most of all, I lost my respect for you and for me. And this is what alcohol did for me, and it's what it'll do for you. If you don't hear anything that I say tonight, listen to this. Never underestimate the power of alcohol. Never underestimate where it can take you. I had no idea that it would take me to the depths of despair as it did. But it did, and I had no control over it. I had no control over it. I couldn't drink and I couldn't not drink. And I didn't enjoy a single drink that I took in those 6 years. I didn't enjoy it. All of it was necessary for me. I found myself in places that I ordinarily wouldn't frequent. And I said, what are you doing in this dive? I couldn't answer that question, but I was back the next night and the next, and soon it became a hangout of mine. But I couldn't tell you why I was there. I was with people whom I ordinarily wouldn't associate with. And I said, what are you doing with this bunch of yo-yos? I couldn't tell you that. But I was back with them the next day, and the next, and they became friends of mine until I got so overbearing they left me. But I couldn't tell you why I was with those people. I was taught principles by my grandfather. He was a great man. He was a simple man, but he was a spiritual man. And I was taught principles, the same principles we teach in Alcoholics Anonymous. And I found myself one day sacrificing the principle of honesty. And a buzzer went off right in here. I knew it was wrong. I said, what did you do that for, dummy? And I couldn't answer that question. I couldn't answer that question. The next time that it happened, it didn't hurt quite as bad. And the next time it hurt even less. And soon it didn't hurt at all. And when you're doing things that are wrong and it doesn't bother you, that means you have no principles to live by. No principles to live by. And when you have no principles to live by, you have very little to live for. And that's the condition that I found myself in. And in the month of December of 1960, I spent in my hometown of Durham, North Carolina, where I was born and raised, where I had gone to school, served on civic boards and committees, we're active with the church, run around in circles, but I was active. All that was gone. And I was panhandling on the streets of my hometown for another drink. This is where alcohol carried me. I had no intentions of that. No intentions of that when I had those 2 glasses of wine. But every time I felt bad, my mind went back to those 2 glasses of wine, and I was going to recapture that feeling. But the euphoric recall almost killed me. It almost killed me. And so this is the condition that I found myself in December of 1960. And I awakened one morning, early one morning, and the bells were ringing. That didn't bother me too much, because they rang most of the time anyhow. But it was Christmas, and I had no idea. I had no idea it was Christmas. Wouldn't have mattered, probably, if I did. Oh, I knew that I was sick. There was a band around my head that was getting tighter and tighter and tighter. There was a pain right here and right here that wouldn't go away. And my past was right there in front of me on the screen, just like an instant replay. And it wouldn't go away. I said, I got something that'll make it go away. I've got a pint of 100 proof, and I'll drink that. And I drank the pint of 100 proof, and the pain was worse. The image was more vivid than it ever was, and I knew that I'd lost my friend. The thing that I relied on most of all, and that was alcohol. And I did exactly what you did when alcohol wasn't doing the job for you anymore. I panicked. And when I panicked, I did exactly the same thing that you did. I fell to my knees and I said, God, if you'll help me one more time, I'll do what you want me to do. That was Christmas Day of 1960. and I haven't had a drink since then. I went to a place for alcoholics, non-medical facility. They didn't have any withdrawal stuff there. They gave me Dilantin, sodium, and aspirin, and neither one of them worked. I didn't know anything for 12 days. I was in DTs for 12 days. I remember bits and pieces. I remember those guys bringing me orange juice and honey. I remember them helping me to the bathroom. I remember them sitting on me to keep me from shaking the place down. And finally, after 12 days, I came to, and I had a clear thought. And my thought didn't go back to those 2 glasses of wine. The miracle continues. My thinking went back to how sick I'd been. And I said, God, I don't ever want to be that sick again. And my second thoughts were the people in Alcoholics Anonymous. And I said, if I live, I'm going back to those people. And you know, that's been a long time ago. And every morning of my life upon awakening, I remember how sick I was. And I don't want to repeat that. And I remember where my help comes from. That's the first 2 thoughts that enter my mind. If you call me on the phone and wake me up, those 2 thoughts have got to enter it before I answer the phone, because this has been my salvation. And I went to Alcoholics Anonymous on that treatment center. I was a mess. I was a real mess. You know, when I went in there, I had my matching luggage, 2 Winn-Dixie shopping bags, and I didn't have decent clothes, and so they gave me a suit. I wish you could have seen it. I think of that suit every day, too. It was a brown double-breast suit, 20 years out of style. Lapels that wide, and the tie was just as wide as lapels. And so this is how I came to Alcoholics Anonymous. You know, I had a little bit of brain damage. You know, I was about a quart low. And I had no recall. I'd listen to a speaker. I said, man, he was great. And I get outside the room. I said, what did he say? And I couldn't remember. But I remembered enough. I remembered that I was an alcoholic. I remembered that you were, and that you were doing something about it, and there was a chance for me. I remembered where the meetings were, and I remembered what night they were on. I don't think you need to know a hell of a lot more than that when you get to Alcoholics Anonymous. We've got a lot of these 28-day wonders, you know, that come in. I don't have anything wrong. I have nothing against 28-day programs. I've been running one for 29 years now. I have nothing wrong with that. It's what they teach them in these 28-day programs. You know, for instance, one came into my group one night, and he just got out of a 28-day program, and he said, my counselor told me that I have the equivalent to a year's sobriety in AA. When I came back through the ceiling, I said, we do it a day at a time. If you got 28 days, you got 1 day more than somebody with 27, 1 less than somebody with 29. And it don't work any other way. This is what I brought to Alcoholics Anonymous. And you didn't say, hey, nice threads. Where'd you get those? You didn't ask me where I worked. You didn't ask me if I had any money. Hell, you didn't even ask me my name. You asked me if I had an honest desire to stop drinking. And I said, worse than anybody you've seen lately. And I meant that. And I mean it tonight. And that desire is stronger tonight than it was almost 37 years ago. 37 years ago, I didn't have anything to lose. I didn't have anything to lose. Today, I have an awful lot to lose. But if I lose that desire to stay sober, if I lose that desire to stay sober, if you've got 3 days and you've got a desire to stay sober, you've got more going for you than I have. So I have to cultivate that desire every day of my life. And I don't want to lose that. You know, I used to pray for God to remove the desire to drink from me. You know, I'd be in a drunken state. I said, God, just give me a desire. Just remove this desire to drink. And he didn't do it. But when I had the desire to stay sober, he removed the desire to drink. It's strange how it works that way, but he did. He did. And so I came into Alcoholics Anonymous. I heard the lady talking about walking to meetings. It was 3 miles from where I lived to the meeting, and my sponsor showed me 3 different ways I could go. He said, you get there and we'll take you home. 50-50. So I was going to the meetings. I didn't fit with the winners because I couldn't understand what they was talking about. I didn't want to be with the losers because we called them flip-flops back then. They'd flip in one week and flop out the next. I didn't want to do that. So I was just sort of hanging loose. And the group assigned me a sponsor. God, that's a hard way to get one, baby. But the group assigned him to me. And he called me up to the podium one night after the meeting. I believe he had the microphone on. I don't know. But he wanted everybody to hear what he said. He said, I don't like this any better than you do, but they've asked me to be your sponsor. I said, oh, that's all I could say. And he said, I want to tell you something. I'm not in this to win your friendship, so you can quit trying to be my friend. He said, I'm in this to save your butt. And if we save your butt, we can become friends afterwards. But until that time, I am your spiritual advisor, and you will do what I tell you to do. I thank God for him. I told the people in the group, I said, I hate him. He said, they said, everybody hates him. Just do what he says. Everything, my God. You know, I quit whining and started whining. You know, and I needed to get my wife back. He said, the book don't say that. And I read the book just to prove him out of line. It says wife or no wife. And I said, well, hell, he's right again. He told me if she didn't come back, I'd get another one. Well, she ain't back yet. I don't believe she's coming back, John. But he told me that I'd get another one, and I met her in Alcoholics Anonymous. We'll soon be married 35 years. And he went with us to get married just to see that his prophecy would be fulfilled. I needed a big job. I needed to make a lot of money. I needed to make this much because I owed this much. You always have to have a little extra, you know. And I couldn't find that job. And I got a job as a butcher, working in the same place that I'd owned at one time. That'll do something for your ego. Oh, yeah. I was making about a third of what I was accustomed to making. They never did pay too good there anyhow. But it proved something to me. it deflated that ego, and I found out that I wasn't a big shot. I wasn't a big shot anymore. God, that helped. I didn't have to throw that money away. I managed my money. The brown suit went away, and I got a new one, you know. Finally, I got a job. I got a decent job. My sponsor told me that I would. And, you know, I started working my steps. And I said, I've worked these steps to the best of my ability. He said, your ability has increased somewhat since I first met you. So now that you've got a better hold on life, let's do the steps again. And I did them again and again. And I don't know which cycle I'm on now, but hell, I'm afraid to quit. He'll come back. You don't want that? I don't. He's been dead 15 years, but he'd come back if I won't work in those steps. I'll tell you how hateful he was. When he died, you couldn't get within 2 miles of the funeral home or his house, either one. He was loved and respected. They didn't agree with him. He was everything that I didn't want to be. He was loud. He was profane. He had absolutely no tact, but he'd been sober as long as God. And I couldn't doubt that. And I never will forget the amends that he helped me to make that I never would have made in my life. I never would have made those amends. I had a list, and the guy that I'd stolen some money from was on that list. And I had a lot of fear about that I would be caught. But I showed it to him, and he said, we got to make amends to him. I said, hell, he don't know nothing about it. He said, yeah, but you do, because you got his name on the list. You know about it. We ain't doing it for him, we're doing it for you. So he told me to save my money, and I got half of it. And we carried it to him. And he said, just tell him you'll be back to take the money, and you'll be back. And so he took the money, said I didn't owe him anything. I said, take the money. And I left. And when I went back, I had the rest of his money. And I told him that I was involved in a program that required me to be honest. And that money was rightfully his. And if I owed him any interest, I'd be glad to pay him. And he said, I ain't never heard of nothing like that. I said, me either. That was brand new to me. Let me tell you about why that was important. My daughter called me sometimes later, 2 or 3 years later. And she said, Daddy, I found a house that we like, and I need some money. And I said, well, honey, I can't get down there today. I'll get down there tomorrow. And she said, will you talk to the real estate man? And I said, yeah. And he answered the phone, and guess who it was? The man that I'd stolen the money from. And he told her, he said, honey, the house is yours. Said, I'll take your dad's word for that. And so this is where it paid off. Another amends that I had to make was to a judge in my hometown that I had known since I was a little child. He sponsored me in the Y when I was a kid. He introduced me to my wife. He sponsored me in the JCs, and I started coming before him. You know, little pity stuff, for a while, and then he got too numerous, and he couldn't dismiss them. And I stood before him one day, and he gave me an active sentence, and I hated him for it. I kept waiting for him to say suspended. He ain't said it yet. 6 months down the train. And I hated him. And the sponsor said, you got to make amends to him. I said, why? I served 6 months. He said, yeah, that was what you were supposed to do. You took advantage of his friendship. You took advantage of his friendship. You could have ruined him. And you need to tell him that you don't have any hard feelings. I said, I can't do it. He said, you're going to do it. You know, he didn't say that you don't have to. He said, you are going to do it. And he went with me, leaning up against the judges. And I told him, I said, if I could have just a minute or two of your time, I'll be out of here, Judge. And I told him, I said, you did what you had to do in my case. And I just wanted you to know that I don't have any hard feelings. And when I told the old man that, he started crying. And when he started crying, I started crying. And when I started crying, I knew that I'd meant what I said. I knew that I'd meant what I said. And you know, that judge became a friend of Alcoholics Anonymous. And he called me down there. I almost lost a job on account of it. You know, he called me down. Every drunk he got in, he'd call us down. But some of those guys died with 25 years of sobriety. That works. The program of Alcoholics Anonymous works. The big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, you know, I don't know of anything they've changed in AA. People said AA is changing. It is not changing. Faces are changing. Faces are changing. Alcoholics Anonymous, the only thing they've changed in that, they changed an honest desire to a desire, and I think they made a mistake then. But that's the only thing that's changed. The 164 reasons that I stay sober are in that book, the first 164 pages. And I feel sorry. I'm like Dr. Bob. Dr. Bob says, if you think you're an atheist, an agnostic, a skeptic, or have any other form of intellectual pride that'll keep you from accepting what's in this book, I feel sorry for you. And I do. If you're an alcoholic of my type, if and when you start to drink and have no control over the amount that you take into your system, you are probably alcoholic. And if you are alcoholic, there's a solution. It's in that book. And you too can find a life that's happy, joyous, and free. Believe me. Take my word for it. It's there. Evidence all over this conference, evidence all over the world that it's working, and it'll work for you. Alcoholics Anonymous has given me an awful lot, but it gave me a set of principles that I can live by, and I'm a different person than I was. I have a God today. And I met him through you. He was real. I saw him in the lives of those people that carried me to AA when I didn't want to go. I see it in the eyes of speakers. I see it in the eyes of people in my home group. I see that, and I know God's working in my life, and I want to be like him. You know, I'm a lot more understanding than I've ever been. I'm a lot more forgiving than I've ever been. I've got a lot more patience than I've ever had. I'm a little more merciful than I've ever been. And I want to be better. Some days I don't do it right. Some days I don't do it right. And I look to him, and I look at what he did for me. His patience and his everything. He treated me like the prodigal son. He let me run my race. And I fell 1,000 times. And every time I fell, he picked me up. And that last time that I fell, I felt almost unworthy of asking him for help again, but I did. And what did he do? What did he do? he came to meet me, and he put his arm around me, and he gave me a gift, just like he did the prodigal son. A magnificent gift. And don't you forget, he gave it to you too. He gave me an opportunity to be a member of this fellowship called Alcoholics Anonymous. Thank you.
We hope you've enjoyed this recording. To obtain additional copies, receive a free catalog of AA and Al-Anon talks, or to find out about our tape and CD of the Month Club, call Encore Audio Archives at 1-800-878-1308, or visit our website at www.12steptapes.com.
I think we got a great talk going on here. Thanks for watching the channel. Taper Dave here. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Okay, this is how I prepare my drone for launching. I like to do it inside the cab of my truck so I'm not standing outside in the weather. To install the joysticks for control, up and down, right and left, powered on. I have an Android phone that I use to connect it to the drone with, and it's actually controlled through the iPhone, through an app. Oops, wrong way. It's actually controlled through the iPhone, or through this Android phone, through the app. It's actually controlled through the Android phone, through an app, and you connect it through this short connection right here.
Remote control connected.
Remote control's connected. So I pull out the drone. I have to extend the legs, long legs extended first, then the short legs. Remove the gimbal protector. Set that aside, then power it on one short burst, then one long burst. I lay it down. So I have to go to calibrate. So the drone's not connected yet. It shows you here as this drone gets disconnected, even though the remote's powered on. So the drone has to establish it's connected. So I go into the app to calibration mode. First I'll calibrate the remote controller. Start calibration. Out, in, oop, out, in, up, down. And then this little wheel is to control the gimbal. So it's calibrated. Go to gimbal calibration, start calibration, and then it calibrates the gimbal. I don't know if that shows up. The gimbal's moving all over the place. Changes, you can see it on the video. And I'm calibrated to take off. It's acquired 7 satellites at the moment. There are 26 satellites up in the sky, which it has to acquire before you can take off. So it's connected. It's got enough satellites. This is white. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right. But I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.